Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie, and today I'm going to take you on a journey to explore how Gacaca courts, a community-based approach led to peace building in Rwanda. As I share this presentation, today marks 4 days after the beginning of the 32nd commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. My first encounter with the deeper meaning of a tree was in 2016, when I heard the story of a client who found healing not through formal interventions, but by speaking to a tree behind her house, a space that offered safety, consistency, and non-judgment. That moment challenged my thinking beyond conventional frameworks and recognized that meaningful healing can emerge in spaces we often overlook, yet hold profound significance to an individual. The fig tree you see in front of you, in my local language, Kinyarwanda, is called umuvumu. This tree carries deep cultural significance to Rwandans. In times of crisis, such as drought, or before a war, rituals were performed under this tree, and over time, it came to be sacred. While modern systems often prioritize mass production, indigenous knowledge remains rooted in harmony and with nature, just like this tree. But it also reminds us the importance of valuing and investing in knowledge systems that are grounded in lived experiences. So for a long time, systems of social work have often been shaped by frameworks that don't always reflect lived experiences, histories, and cultures of communities in the global South. Yet concepts such as healing, justice, and reconciliation cannot simply be imported. They must be grounded in the realities of people. And this is where indigenous knowledge matters. It becomes important not as an alternative, but as something essential. Unfortunately, indigenous knowledge is often misunderstood as backward, rural, and unscientific. Yet in reality, it's place-based, it's collective, it's holistic, and very adaptable. On April 7th, 1994, marked the beginning of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in my country. Within 100 days, over 1 million Tutsis were systematically exterminated by a Hutu extremist government. What were once socio-economic groups became rigid ethnic categories. Colonial systems institutionalized these identities, making them hierarchical and deeply divisive, which resulted to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. In 1996, the Rwandan government began the long-awaited genocide trials. The delay was due to the fact that the country had lost most of its judicial personnel, not to mention the destruction of courts, jails, and other infrastructure. By 2000, there were over 100,000 genocide suspects awaiting trial. And at the time, we had also 150,000 detainees, and Rwanda's prisons could only accommodate 12,000. Gacaca, which means on the grass in my local language, is rooted in an indigenous Rwandan knowledge systems, where community members and elders gathered to resolve disputes and restore social harmony. Drawing on this tradition, Rwanda adopted Gacaca, a community justice-based system. These gatherings often took places under a tree, as you can see in the image, and a tree that also had significant meaning to our society. This became a place where people came together in one shared space to reflect on what had happened in order to begin a collective and relational approach that was grounded in lived experiences. Gacaca, or the Gacaca courts, later evolved into a nationwide community-based justice mechanism. Communities elected judges. As you can see, the ones who have the blue and yellow sachets are the judges, and the person standing in front of them at the time was a perpetrator, and the communities surround them. These judges were not lawyers by profession. They were individuals who were considered individuals of integrity in the community. They were trained to preside over cases, and perpetrators were sentenced based on the severity of their crimes. Those who confessed would receive reduced sentences, often in form of community service, as you can see on the image on the left. The Gacaca court was not only about legal classification or punishment. Instead, it drew on indigenous practices of collective accountability to create space for truth-telling, reconciliation within the very communities where harm had occurred. It required individuals to not only account for their actions, but to do so in the presence of those they had harmed. This process was grounded in justice, relationships, lived experiences, and shared responsibility. It was also a time for Rwanda to gather documentation and evidence of what had happened. So the image you see below are of individuals who were engaged in community service as part of their sentence. So through these Gacaca courts, ordinary citizens played a direct role in truth-telling and accountability. These testimonies helped document what happened during the genocide, and the courts created a space for communities to confront the past in order to shape the future. In many cases, survivors and perpetrators sat in the same space, beginning a very difficult journey towards coexistence. Between 2001 and 2012, the Gacaca courts prosecuted nearly 2 million cases, operating at an estimated cost of 3.3 million. In parallel, we had the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda was established to prosecute high-level cases. Operating from November 8, 1994 to December 31, 2015, the International Criminal Tribunal indicted 93 individuals with an annual budget of approximately $270 million. Here we see two different expressions of justice. On the left, I'm trying to make sure I know which my left and right is. We see the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, which was formal, structured, and oftentimes they probably sat under a very beautiful building. Whereas on the right, we see the Gacaca courts, which was held outdoors, sometimes under trees. These were spaces where ordinary citizens gathered, listened, and spoke. Justice here was not removed from the people, it was embedded within them. After the Gacaca courts concluded, the process of reconstruction began, drawing on homegrown indigenous knowledge systems to derive economic recovery and rebuild social cohesion in our post-genocide context. And this is where my journey begins. In 2015, I began working with youth and adults from both survivor and ex-perpetrator families. Over the past 10 years, I continue to witness how individuals who carried deep pain began their healing journey and reimagined their future as a community. These spaces were collective, as you can see in my interaction with these amazing women who are survivors of the genocide. And at the beginning, survivors and perpetrators sat separately. Over time, that eased, and they were able to sit side by side, working alongside this community. I learned that healing is not linear, and it does not happen in isolation. It happens in relationships. After more than a decade of working alongside these communities, I came to realize the importance of ensuring that indigenous grassroots interventions are not implemented, but also reflected in policy spaces. And as a Rotary Peace Fellow, this journey has deepened my commitment to critically examine power structures by rethinking, reframing, and reclaiming the very foundations of peace. I wanted to bring this back home to the very society that has hosted us for the past 2 years. And what can we learn from these indigenous communities in North Carolina? So indigenous knowledge practices are very much alive right here in North Carolina. Their community-led decision-making is present across many tribes, such as the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, forgive my pronunciation, where community members gather in council spaces to discuss issues that affect their people. Decisions here are not made in isolation, they are made collectively. There's also a key aspect of relational accountability, which shows up in how communities remain accountable, not just to each other, but to the land and future generations. The Okanichi Band of Saponi Nation is actively building a tribal center and cultural village, preserving history while creating spaces for future generations. Culture, as a form of resilience, is also evident in the Lambi tribe of North Carolina, where cultural identity, storytelling, and education have sustained the community despite historical exclusion and lack of federal recognition. And local leadership is also very much present, which is reflected in organizations such as the Cumberland County Association of Indian People, which provides services grounded in the needs and voices of the community, supporting education, health, and economic development. And this deeply connects to what we saw, in Rwanda. Justice was not removed from the community, it was brought back to it. People gathered, spoke, listened, and rebuilt relationships. So you might be wondering, what can we do with this information we've learned today? Let's partner for peace building. Our core message at this conference is peace. And now as our theme reminds us, peace is built from the margins. Yes, it's still morning. So this morning, I'd like to call upon you to fund and expand Indigenous-led initiatives because most communities are already doing this work. I know the Rotary Foundation is also heavily involved in working with Indigenous communities, so maybe we can continue this process. Learn in relationships, because as we step into spaces, we should show up where peace is already being practiced. We need to integrate Indigenous approaches into our work and center community voice, dialogue, and collective healing. We also need to co-create knowledge with communities by working with them, not on them. Rwanda has demonstrated this by embedding Indigenous homegrown solutions into our national framework. Our Article 11 of the Constitution, acknowledges culture as a foundation for addressing local challenges. And this is not just a recognition, it's an action we practice every day. And because we are each leaders in our own capacity, we need to shift our power and resources towards community-led solutions where peace is already taking root. If there's anything that Gacaca teaches us, is that peace is not built from the center outward. It's built from the margins inward, through relationships, accountability, and shared responsibility. Because people do not return to places, they return to relationships. As I conclude this presentation, we have a beautiful spring weather, so please connect with me and we can have a discussion under a tree. Thank you.